Okay, everybody, are you just drooling over this still life? I know I am. Oh, it's so amazing. Okay, so I'm going to start first with some raw umber in my medium. And I really just kind of want to block out where it, almost like an envelope shape here, where the roses are going to be, okay, and then the glass vase. Because I need, with the time of the lesson being so short, I really need to get this covered in red quickly. And I don't want to get a bunch of red into places, little V shape here separating out, where the white roses are going to be, because red and white they don't go well together whenever you wet into wet, get them wet into wet. So I really have to be careful about that. So I just kind of want to frame out like, okay, here's this rose here. I'm just going to use a cube to do that, or sort of a diamond shape here. And then we have this one in the background, so it's going to end here. Okay, just roughly getting their size and placement. And then this one here. You know, if a little bit of red sneaks in there on some of the contours, that's okay. We just don't want a lot of red. So that's the kind of the biggest challenge, I would say. And then we have this one kind of back in the background, but it's so covered up with branches and leaves. Even if red gets into green, that's okay, because they're complements and it will actually help the green neutralize a bit. But just make sure you don't tone with red. Make sure that you really, figure out where your white roses are going first, so that you can avoid that problem. Because once you get that problem of the red into the white, it is hard to overcome. You can, if you do run into that problem, you can either wash it, kind of wipe it with your paper towel in some mineral spirits, let it kind of dry a bit, evaporate a bit, and then you can go back in with the white. Okay, so it's not like you can't fix it, but it's problematic. Okay, all right, so now let's go ahead and mix up the deepest, darkest red, which is actually going to be on the starting edge of the vase. You always want to look at your value contrasts first. Where is the darkest value? Where's the darkest, deepest red? Otherwise, you might paint that, let's say that background, too dark and too red, thinking, oh, that's really a dark red. So I'm doing ivory black and alizarin crimson. This is for my darkest edge of red on the starting edge of the glass, because glass always starts darker and then light moves through it. Okay, even on a dark value glass. Now, towards the middle, we're going to start to lighten it up a bit with some cab red light and more alizarin crimson in the mix to take it to that really deep ruby red. It's not too much of a value shift. Make sure that you don't lose that left starting edge, which I'm kind of already doing, which means I'm going to have to come back in with some black again, black and crimson, and just restate that starting edge and kind of blend into that lighter red. There we go, there we go. That's good. The bottom two, there's a little line of darker value there. Any of these stems showing through, they're going to be darker for the most part. So here I'm seeing a dark stem on that side. The top of the vase will be darker because it's all in shadow, cast shadow from the roses. Okay, then reflected light or transmitted light moving through the vase is mostly cad red light. I'm going to do a little tiny touch of that alizarin crimson, and then we're just going to blend that in with a vase color. Okay. I am going to go ahead and just get a little highlight action going on here. Not to say that this won't be modified. I'm just using pure white right now, just to start to pull the eye to the center of the form and create that illusion of three-dimensional form. Okay, now I can, more accurately judge that background color. And I'm going to say the background value is more in this value, which is the middle value of the vase. Okay, so that's the mixture that has a little more of that cab red light, a little more alizarin. And I'm also going to push that back a little bit by cooling it off and neutralizing it a bit with some raw umber. And actually, I think we can neutralize it a little bit more. You could also use black. You can also use a little touch of that green, like a phthalo green cool. But this isn't as pure of a color as our brain wants to tell us it is. So it doesn't have to be straight out of the tube red for it to feel really rich and really red. Now I could also see if you wanted to like zoom in and do like a vignette of just the roses against a deep red background, you could also do that. You know, whatever you like, do it. This is your world, your painting. And I'm going to go a little bit more umber on this side. A little bit darker since there's some shadow over here. But we just want to get enough of this in to get it covered. I am adding some medium here, so it will be a little bit thin. Just kind of scrubbing that on to kill the white, get the background covered so that we can work on the roses. Okay. And then a little touch of white here, especially around that lit edge of the vase. And then I'm going to need some more alizarin. So I do need a little more opacity and a little more contrast right here around that edge, dark edge of the vase. And then of course on the tabletop. Always, always your top planes get more light. 9 times out of 10, our light is coming from up above, whether that's a landscape, portrait, unless you're doing a backlight painting, or perhaps maybe a sunset, but even sunset or sunrise, you're still going to have top planes and light. Okay, so you have to get enough background in so that we really set that mood, that really rich red mood that we're going for. Okay. And now that I have enough of that in, let's reload that alizarin crimson. It might be about all we need for the rest of the painting. I'm going to go back to that ivory black and alizarin crimson, tiniest little touch of the cab red light for the cast shadow on that red. Cast shadow color and value is always related to the object that the cast shadow is on. So since this is a dark red, you know, I need to go darker on the cast shadow. And then I see where I could go a little bit darker back here as well. Don't worry about some of these edges in the drawing if they get covered up or lost. You can always, always, always bring them back. Just like this edge, got a little covered up, working wet into wet against that background. So just mix up the dark color again and bring it back, okay? Okay, awesome. And then we will have, I put a little leaf, since this is a tabletop view, I did put a little holly leaf coming down here. I like to scrape out the stem with my back of my brush, and then kind of we can wipe away where some of those lit green leaves are going to be. All right. Okay, let's, I'm going to switch to a different brush since that is so covered. Again, that alizarin and white, those are the two that's like, man, you got to be really careful about those two colors together. So I am going to switch now that I'm going to roses to a clean brush. And also, you guys, these are good brushes too, these Robert Simmons Signet brushes. If you can't, they're a little bit cheaper than the Silver Grand Prix. So they're another good option for a brush. Filbert, still a filbert. Okay, now this is a cool kind of yellow green, so I'm going to start the whole rose with this cad lemon and some white. Okay, without the green in it for now. I'm just going to kind of cover up that raw umber that I started with. If some of it mixes in, that's okay. I'm just going to block in just a singular color for these. And again, if some of that red mixes in along the edges, that's okay. I just didn't want all of that red to have to overcome, and I'm going to kind of scrub this one in because this one's back in space, and so we kind of want it to recede a bit more. So just get those big shapes in. And now I can see where, when I go back to my red brush, where I can kind of pull some of this red down a little bit more. Go back to my red mixture on my palette, just to see like, oh, okay, I can get a little bit darker red around this rose now that I have more clarity on the shape. Beautiful. Mix up more paint. I'm kind of out of paint. And I can also just kind of start to carve out some of these edges, perhaps a little more precisely, slowing down. You know, to go fast, you have to think slow sometimes, which feels a little counterintuitive, but slow down, focus, and be distinct with your brushwork. That way you get more accurate brushwork and you don't have to go back and rework a lot. Okay? At least that's the ideal scenario. Okay. Now coming back to this one, I really want to look at the contour, look at the little ins and outs. They usually form a little triangle shape in between those layers of petals. And then I just kind of blend some of that in to make it look like I didn't do that. Now over here is the holly leaf that is light against the background, so I also need to really take this white shape I left behind and basically turn it into a holly shape. Okay, good, good, good. And so let's go to that green color, at least some of the light greens. And I'm gonna just wipe away a bit here where I do see some of the lighter greens that maybe I put some dark over. Just the tip of this one getting hit with green, this one overlapping in front of the vase, this one a little bit lighter green. Squint down, see which greens look lighter than the background, lighter in value, and which greens kind of disappear against the background, which means that they're darker. And only wipe out the ones that are lighter. There's also kind of a lighter petal here coming down. Okay, it's not going to remove all of it, but it'll remove enough of it. Okay, so let's start to turn some of these, give some of these roses some form. So I'm going to add in some raw umber into that mix and some of the cad lemon to get a little, basically just a darker version of this color for the shadow planes. So this whole side of this rose is in shadow. Okay, so I'm just going to paint right into that color that I blocked in, trying to leave that lighter color for the petal that is folded over, catching light. This underneath is also in shadow. So we're just looking for some big, simple shapes. On this side, just a little bit darker, so I'm just ever so gently mixing that wet into wet because this isn't quite as dark as the full-on shadow side. But you have to remember that roses are like little bowls, and so they are a little concave in the center, which means with our light coming from the left side here, that the inside of the bowl is going to be a little bit darker, a little bit more in shadow. So same thing over here. Some of these petals, they start off in shadow. So I'm turning my brush to the side, and then the inside goes a little bit darker as well. It also goes more colorful, but I'm just going to get the value for now. This one, the whole underplane here is in shadow, and that can actually go a little bit darker and also get a little bit of the red flavor. So I'm grabbing some background color with my raw umber, with my cad lemon to get this. This is turning mostly away from the light compared to the other rose, and turning towards the background, so it goes a little bit darker, a little bit warmer. Now then you're gonna see like some little dark accents like in here, little cast shadows. So I'm just using my background red value to block that in. Okay. And then on the center of this rose, let's also go a little bit more colorful. So I'm gonna grab a little bit of red with my cad lemon just to get this a little bit warmer, a little bit more colorful on the center. Usually on the center of roses, you have a little more color. Okay, and these roses really have that beautiful little lemony, little ribbon-like shape. Okay, going a little more on the raw umber and yellow, a little bit darker for this back petal here. And I feel like I need a little more red in that mix. And I could have taken that a little darker, too dark, so maybe a little bit of white. Okay, this whole shadow plane of this rose in shadow. And I put a dark green leaf there on purpose just to separate these roses out a bit more from one another. Turning my brush to the side just to get a finer, skinnier stroke where needed. And then to finish these roses off, we're going to really have to have the green in place. So we need to get that green cooking and fast, because there's little flavors of the green showing up too. But if you're ever in doubt on the shadow color, go back to that raw umber, cad lemon, and a little bit of the white, just to get a little bit warmer, darker yellow. Okay, good. Now let's mix up some greens. I'm gonna switch down. Maybe I will still use that brush. Now I've got my my Phthalo Green Cool. I'm going to add some cad lemon to it, and you're going to see like how toxic of a green that's going to go. Like very vibrant, right? Very vivid. So I'm going to add a little bit of my Cab Red Light into this to neutralize that coolness and that purity of the color. So red is going to neutralize the green. So that's pretty good, because it's not that cold of a green, nor is it that pure. So I tend to kind of draw the edges with my brush and then fill in the shape when it comes to leaves. The other way is just to put in a flat shape and then come back in with background color later to carve out some of the drawings. So you can do it either way. Sometimes I do it one way, sometimes I do it the other way. Okay, and then we need a darker version of this for the shadow, so more of the green, and then the red, the Cab Red Light, and just the tiniest bit of the green's going to darken, but this yellow here is going to lighten it. So you just need the tiniest bit of that yellow to get a darker version of that green. And this is where we have this green leaf, darker version of that green, and I could even go darker. So I'm going to start to pull in some of that background red. The background red will also neutralize. So let's go a little bit darker because this leaf is really dark. It's almost black. It's almost like no color. So I'm just going to do my phthalo green cool, or if you have sap green, that could also work, you know, just like a deep green. And then back to that middle green, which has less of that cad yellow for some of these that are a little bit lighter than that. Just try to make really specific brush strokes. That takes a lot of practice to get good at, you know, discerning what kind of shape to make, what kind of brush stroke to make. So keep training your eye, keep practicing. It does get easier and easier over time. We have one here. I'm just going to kind of loosely block some of these in with that same color, mixing into the red to kind of push them back. You could take these off the canvas up here if you want to. You could also leave these out if you didn't want to include them. It's up to you. It's not going to make or break the composition necessarily. And I don't really have time to do all of them, and I really want to get us back to the roses to do a little more detail on them. Okay, so basically add more of that lighter yellow in the mix when you need to go lighter. You could also use Naples yellow light to lighten, a little pinch of white as well if necessary, on some of this lighter green. I'm still feeling like, gosh, that's so, shadow should not be that colorful. So I'm going to come back in with that, really my dark red from the background. I'm going to steal some of this just to cancel out some of the green. Okay. Cab red light for some of these berries. I am mixing it into my dark here. But they are lighter in value and more of a pure color. Just making shapes, really trying to tie some of these shapes together, especially in the center, away from the outer contour, so that they really become one shape, one mass in the painting, and not like a bunch of tiny little berries, you know, each one fighting for attention. And so this one, we've got one down here that's separate that we can do more light on, more specific shape on. Maybe this one against the vase. A little more cab red light, painted in wet into wet there. Okay. And one thing I like to do, of course, is that skewer or the back of my brush for a specific highlight. On things like berries and grapes, glass, you know, you have to apply a specific highlight. It can't get blended in. Okay, let's really wipe that brush out and go back to our roses. Right now I'm going to look for some of the lightest petals that are getting more light, so a little less yellow in the mix, mostly white. For example, this one here. And I'll give you basically a tip, and that is all of the top planes of the petals will be more lighter. The ones that are folded down, like this one is folded down, is going to catch more light. And then all of the right-hand side planes will catch more light because our light is coming from the left. So turning my brush to the side to get some of these edges of the rows that are catching more light. Just kind of sharpening up some edges here. Okay, these are going to be really fine and narrow edges of light on this one. So break out a smaller brush. You could even get one out that's smaller than mine. I think mine's a number 2. Or if you're working bigger, you might not need to do that. But this petal in front of the center of the rose, making sure I've got a strong enough overlap there. And then right here, that right-hand side, right, where the light is catching more because it's coming from top left, that's really where we want to hit that with some more light, some more white in the mix. And then we need some finer little top lights on some of these fine petals. Just to flesh those roses out a little bit more. Okay, and on this one I forgot to put that interior color where it gets a little more colorful, so I'm going to mix up my cad yellow, cad lemon, and my cad red light with a little bit of that white. Come in here in the center. Need some specific brush strokes there. Little layers of petals that are all kind of clustered together. And then grab some of that green with your white, your lemony white. And these roses in particular have that little flavor of green in them. So I'm just gonna look at my rose and see, you know, where does some of that green, it's along the edges really, mostly the ruffly edges of the petal. Get some of that green flavor showing up in there to go with my Christmassy red and green. So we really only have 2 roses really to paint. The other 2 are really back in the background and can be left very simplified. So I also see a lot of green here on this rose. So put a little more green on this one. And this is one that's folded down, but it's turning away from the light source, so it's mostly in shadow. So you really have to study, know the angle of your light source and study how light is falling. But the very, very top of it here just gets the finest little rim of light. And then the side of the petal too gets a little rim light. Okay, so just putting that little bit of light ever so gently on there, and then I do want to soften the interior edge. So I do want to leave that overlapping edge sharper, but then soften the inside edge of it into the shadow. Now to get a little more clarity on this, I'm going to go for my my Phthalo Green Cool, my Alizarin Crimson, because this is really where I want the sharpest edges, the most value contrast is in this section. Okay, so I really want to come back in and kind of clean up some of this detail, get it a little sharper and clearer. Let's just repaint that green leaf. Okay, so carving out those edges a little sharper. A little bit of glow coming through here, so I'm going to put some more red and yellow mix in this underplane. And just pushing paint around to modify the drawing, modify the edges. Same thing over here. I can really use this dark paint. Now, if you let your paint set up a little bit more, you're going to have more control over it. So oil paint is like super, super buttery at first. As it begins to set up, you can manipulate it better, especially the white. The white is perhaps the most uncontrollable. So sometimes taking a break is really like the best idea. Letting the paint do some of the work for you. You don't have to work as fast or straight through as I do here. Seeing a little bit more of that green showing up there on the edge. Just make sure whenever you are putting in little flecks of the green that you don't go too dark. You don't want it to look black. And always go back to that basic structure. Make sure it's having that basic structure of a rose, because sometimes as we work, things can start to get a little confusing. So go back. If you start to lose the structure, go back to that simplicity, the simple two shapes of the beginning, light and shadow. And make sure that it's not getting too complicated. I'm just going to put a little bit more red on the inside there. Okay, everybody, I hope that this has been inspiring to you, helpful to you. Super excited to see your results in the Facebook group. I hope it's helped you understand doing red on red and red against white, the best ways to approach that and understand the roses a little bit more. Okay, happy painting. Bye.